Hello, dear Junior 6 students. How are you doing? I really hope that you enjoyed your mid-year vacation and you are ready to start off the second term with some enthusiasm. Okay, in this video, we are going to start our new reader for this term, which is Oliver Twist, written by Charles Dickens. I'm sure that you are going to enjoy it because it is really enjoyable. And I want you to know that, of course, the reader that we have with us is a simplified version of the original work or the original novel. The original novel written by Charles Dickens is much longer, and again, it is more difficult in terms of the language itself. I really encourage you to read it at some point. And I want you to know that in this term, we are going to study only the first 10 chapters of this reader. So I encourage you to try to read the rest of it. You are going to enjoy it very much, more like a bedtime story or something. Treat it like that to be able to finish it and be excited to read it. Okay, before we start Oliver Twist, let's know some information about the writer who is Charles Dickens. Of course, you know that last term we studied Shakespeare and we got to know about a lot about this amazing playwright. In this term, we are going to get to know to a new writer who is called Charles Dickens. And Charles Dickens was a novelist, not a playwright. A novelist is someone who wrote novels. A playwright is someone who wrote plays. So this is the main difference between Charles Dickens and William Shakespeare. Now, let's watch this video made by the BBC about the life of Charles Dickens.
Charles John Hutham Dickens was born on the 7th of February 1812 to John and Elizabeth Dickens. Charles was the second child of 8 siblings in all, 6 of whom survived to adulthood. John, a naval clerk, always spent beyond his means. One day he pointed out a house to Charles, remarking that he could live in such a house if he worked hard. The family moved to London in 1822. At 12, as the family finances worsened, Charles had to start work in a blacking factory, labelling bottles for 11 hours a day. John Dickens was eventually sent to a debtor's prison. Charles visited him there every Sunday. His youth left him with an ambitious drive. In 1827 he began work as a solicitor's clerk. From the surroundings of his unremarkable office, he began to collect names and characteristics of the people he saw. Charles began a journalistic career in 1831. Writing became his passion. Working for the paper by day and on his own work by night, he was beginning to taste success. His first piece of fiction was published in 1835. That same year, Charles met Catherine Hogarth. They fell in love and were married. The next few years of fervent activity resulted in much writing and many children. As his writing became more popular and his fame more widespread, rumours began to abound of his drunkenness and admission to an asylum. Stories were easy to concoct about the writer, who kept a pet raven, and whose writing dealt in the extremes of the sentimental and the grotesque. In 1842, Charles and Catherine set sail for America. On landing in Boston, they were mobbed by crowds. Dickens' interest lay in visiting the unusual, which inspired his writing. He took his whole family on his next big trip to Italy in the summer of 1844. Upon his return, Dickens began to look for new diversions. He helped to start and edit a radical newspaper, founded a refuge for homeless women, and performed his works at public readings. Aged 44, Charles bought Gad's Hill, the house his father had pointed out to him all those years before. It symbolised a pinnacle of achievement. Whilst Dickens was organising a theatrical project, The Frozen Deep, he met and was spellbound by a young actress, Ellen Ternan. There is much speculation about this relationship that caused the end of his marriage to Catherine. One fateful night in 1865, whilst Charles and Ellen were returning from Paris, their train crashed outside Staplehurst. Dickens administered brandy and water to the injured and dying. Only at the last minute did he remember to retrieve the final part of Our Mutual Friend from the wrecked carriage. The incident left Charles very shaken. For a while he maintained his busy itinerary, then his health began to fail. At home on Wednesday the 9th of June 1870, at the age of 58, Charles suffered a stroke and died. He's buried in Westminster Abbey.
Okay, now that we know some information about Charles Dickens, as you have seen in this video, Charles was born in a big family. He had many siblings, and his family, or his father in particular, had financial issues. He went to prison because of his debts. Debts means money that he took and didn't return. So Charles had a very, very difficult childhood. His mother objected to him receiving an education, so he didn't finish his education as a child, and he had to work in a factory to be able to support his family. And his hard childhood has affected him, or it influenced his works. And this is seen in many of his novels, such as Oliver Twist, which we are going to look at. Also, he worked as a journalist later, and he wrote many great literary works, such as David Copperfield, A Tale of Two Cities, and Oliver Twist. Okay, before we start the novel itself, or the reader itself, let us meet the characters of this novel. Okay. The first character is the title character, Oliver Twist, of course. Oliver is an orphan. An orphan means that he has no father and no mother. He was born in a workhouse, and a workhouse means a place for those who didn't have money or didn't have any place to live. He runs away to London and is taken by a group of thieves, and we are going to see what happens when he meets and gets involved with these thieves. Second character is Mr. Bumble. Mr. Bumble is an important officer in the workhouse. He is cruel to the children in this workhouse, and all the people responsible for the workhouse are actually cruel to these children. They treated them in a very bad way. Moving on to the following character, Jack Dawkins. Jack Dawkins is one of Fagin's gang, and we are going to know who is Fagin. He is called the Artful Dodger, and he is the one who takes Oliver from the street to Fagin's house. He is the first one who meets Oliver in London. Moving on to the following character is Fagin himself. Who is Fagin? Fagin is the leader of a group of thieves. He trains children to pick pockets for him. He wanted Oliver to work for him. The following character is Bill Sikes. Bill Sikes is a criminal, another criminal or another thief. He kidnaps Oliver and takes him back to Fagin. He threatens Oliver to work with him. The next character is Nancy. Nancy works for Bill Sikes. She disguises and goes to the police station to ask about Oliver. She pretends to be a fine girl with clean clothes and stuff like that to go to the police station to ask where Oliver goes. Following character is Mr. Brownlow. And Mr. Brownlow is a kind gentleman. He is a rich man. He is the first person to treat Oliver kindly. He takes Oliver to his house to take care of him. One more character is Rose. Rose is a young lady who lives with her aunt, Mrs. Maylie. She is caring and kind to Oliver. She takes care of Oliver during his illness. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our characters presentation. What I'm going to ask you is, I'm going to ask you to pause this video, go to your readers, read chapter 1, and go to your CD and listen to chapter 1. 2 audio files, chapter 1A and chapter 1B. I want you to listen to both because these two tracks are reading chapter 1, which we are going to discuss in this video. Okay, now that I suppose that you have read and listened to the tracks I told you about, having read the chapter 1 as I told you, now let's start discussing the summary of this chapter. I'm just going to play the presentation. Okay, now let's start our presentation on the main events of chapter 1. Chapter 1 starts with Oliver Twist's birth. Oliver Twist was born in a workhouse, which is a house for poor people who had no money and nowhere to live. So the novel itself begins with the birth of Oliver Twist, a young woman. Of course, it's Oliver's mother. She is really ill. She stays in a workhouse. She gives birth to a baby boy, whom they call Oliver Twist. Oliver's mother asks to see her baby and then dies. Oliver is raised in the workhouse and no one could know who his father is. So before she dies, Oliver's mother asks to see her baby, kisses him, and then dies. Of course, this baby has nowhere else to go. He has no father, no one else to take care of him, so he stays at the workhouse. He is an orphan, as I said before. An orphan means that he has no parents. At the age of 9, Oliver is taken by Mr. Bumble, the officer in the workhouse, to start working for his living. So it's time for Oliver to start working for his bread. Oliver and other children in the workhouse aren't given enough food or clothes. They choose Oliver to ask for more food. Oliver does, and the master hits him. So this is the master scene of the whole novel. This is a very famous scene in English literature. Oliver and the other children are given only soup every day for the three as the 3 meals, and on Sundays they are given a small piece of bread. One day Oliver is chosen to ask for more food, and the master, the man in charge for giving the children food, is afraid that other children will do the same as Oliver. How dare he ask for more food, actually? So Oliver is severely beaten every morning in front of other children, and he is kept in a dark room. Mr. Bumble decides to punish Oliver every day. He puts a sign on the gate of the workhouse offering £5 to whoever would take Oliver Twist. Mr. Sourberry agrees. So the workhouse offers £5 to anyone who would take Oliver. And Mr. Sourberry, he is a coffin maker. He makes coffin, and a coffin is the box in which a dead person is put. He agrees to take Oliver as his apprentice. So Oliver now is going to leave the workhouse to Mr. Sourberry's house, and he's going to be his apprentice, his assistant. He's going to work for him, to serve him. Okay, this marks the end of chapter 1. I really hope that you started to enjoy this novel, and you're going to start it later, inshallah. Uh, First, I want to share with you a presentation on the important quotations. As you know, of course, every time we discuss a specific chapter or a specific part, we look at the important quotations of this part. And I want to remind you of what to do in a quotation question, like what you got in the exam. A quotation question, you should tell me who says this, to whom, what is the situation, what are they talking about, what happens after that. So tell me what everything about this situation, to be precise. Okay, now let's start looking at the first quotation. It says, "Please, sir, I want some more." You will find this quotation on page 2. Who says this? Of course, I can hear you saying the right answer. Oliver Twist says this. So these words are said by Oliver Twist to the master in the workhouse. He is chosen by other children to ask for more food because they are given very little food and are always hungry. Moving on to the last quotation in chapter 1, it says, "Do you know anybody who wants a boy and £5? You will find this one on page 4. So from this picture, who is this person? And he's saying these words to whom? Exactly, it's Mr. Bumble. These words are said by Mr. Bumble to Mr. Sourberry at the workhouse. The workhouse offers £5 to whoever will take Oliver Twist because he has asked for more food. And Mr. Bumble is afraid other children will do what Oliver has done. So they have to get rid of Oliver Twist before he influences or before he affects other children. So this brings us to the end of discussing chapter 1 of Oliver Twist. And before we end this video, I want you to see the master scene of this chapter and the master scene of the whole novel. Let's take a look. Now that you have seen the scene of Oliver Twist asking for more food, of course you can imagine how small children were treated at that time. They were treated very cruelly, and they had to work for very long hours doing such hard work to be able to live, and they were given very little food and very little money if they are given money. So this brings us to the end of our video today. I hope that you enjoyed chapter 1. Next time, inshallah, we are going to discuss chapter 2 of Oliver Twist. Thank you so much for watching, and see you later.